In this lesson, we're going to look at mixing next to me. Now, it's important to say from the off, a lot of what I'm discussing here, you probably won't be able to copy 100%, just purely because your mixes are going to be different to mine. And it's such a creative process, and any change that you've made along the way will definitely change the impact of what mine's doing. So for this lesson, I'm not actually going to share any screenshots. I'm just going to talk through some common best practice, okay? So what you should be trying to do, what you should be trying to achieve, and how you should try to go about that. So first thing is, because of the task that we're doing, we're trying to recreate next to me. So it's really important that as we go through the mixing process, that you are listening to the actual song, you're comparing it with your own song, and you're making those adjustments appropriately. Now, one of the things that I always say to my students is the best way of doing this is to loop section by section. Now this takes a long time, so be patient with it and make sure you just take your time. So the first thing is we'll loop a section and we'll just keep listening to that section. So here I've got the intro looped and I'll keep comparing and contrasting. So I'll listen to the intro of their version and then I'll take it off a solo and listen to it on mine. And at this point, if I notice something that needs changing, I will make that alteration. Now, it's really important that you don't go, there's a change there, and goes to your slider and pull it down. What you've got to remember, as we've been working through this course, we've been setting up our basic mix, okay? And it's really important to do a basic mix and then start the creative process of making it exactly the way you want. So now we have to use automation to make those changes, because what will happen is when you were going through this process, it might have been that the chorus needs this level or the verse needs this level, but the intro needs something that's slightly higher or slightly quieter. So if you change something now that we're listening to the intro and you don't automate it, when you get to the chorus later on, it's going to be completely different and you're going to be like, oh God, now I've broke my mix, oh God, it's rubbish and I've got to start again. And that is so often the case. Now, another thing that I would do at this point is do a save as. Go up to your file menu, press save first, and then go save as and call it Next to Me Project 2.0 Start of Mix. Okay, and that will tell you that 1.9 was when you were doing your basics and 2.0 is when you started the mix. So if you do break stuff during this mix process, you can always go back to 1.9 and start again. If you don't do a save as now, that is not going to be available to you. Okay, and if you don't label it properly, the convention, you won't be able to know what the last version was when you actually started the mix, so that will cause you a headache as well. And it's good to get into these labeling conventions. 1.9, this is the start of the mix, and you know something, you can have your labels can be as long as you want, so if they need to be more descriptive, make them more descriptive. It will help you in the long run know where you've got to go back to if you make a mistake. But this is the point that we start to use automation, okay? So let me just shut this mixing window and we'll come to the automation panel. So as we're listening to this track, you think, okay, this main vocal isn't there, so I won't look at that. This grungualizer is too quiet, so let's go into it now. But you'll notice I've got grungualizer later, so I'm thinking to myself, actually, I don't want to change any of this. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put some dots in, okay, to make sure that anything that happens is okay. So if I was doing verse 2, for instance, I could go, okay, this needs to be slightly quieter. Now I've pulled that down, it's made that quieter, but it hasn't changed that and it hasn't changed that. So when you're listening to that section, as it is at the moment in the verse, and we could change that to the verse 1 or verse 2 or whatever just by moving it along. As we're listening to this section and we're making our adjustments ever so slightly, and it does need to be slight adjustments, we're not destroying what comes later. So that's your first bit of practice. Get into the habit of using the automation. If your automation isn't on, it's really easy. Come over to, if you've got the track selected, come over to here and turn it on. As easy as that. Now I tend to use it in read mode. The reason I do this is because it's not destructive, okay? It only changes what you change and nothing else. And you can't destroy anything by accidentally touching one of the dials or one of the levels or whatever. If you put it into touch, latch or write, that can happen very, very easily. So I use it in read mode, keeps me safe, make sure I don't make any silly mistakes. So you will go through, you will listen to the track, you will, let's just do this. So you're going to go, okay, solo the track, so let's press play. Okay. Fantastic. let's listen to mine. Okay, so need to put a bit more grunge in it. Just do that. Okay, probably got to come down to the piano, probably lift the piano up at this point. So let's put a couple of dots in there, and let's just lift the piano up a bit so we get a bit more there. And shaker could probably be a bit louder. Okay, so we've got a bit more going on now. Let's go back to the actual mix. And what you're noticing is I've put my 2 dots in at the end of this section. I've put my 2 dots in so I know anything that comes after it is not going to be affected. One thing you should also be doing is zooming into that section. Okay, I've got 4 bars, so I'm just going to zoom in. So that is what's in, because what would happen if I left it the way it was, you'll notice that my dots are actually quite far apart, and I don't necessarily want them quite that far apart, okay? So now I can see exactly what's going on, and just for that section. So there's a bit of good practice for you to do with automation. But the most important thing is that you are listening to your track, listening to their track. We didn't do that compare. Okay, we'll listen to mine. And it's still a bit empty. I'm still going to have to work with more of that. A bit more grunge is definitely needed. So let's turn that up. Let's see what we got now. Okay, so yeah, still a bit of work, and that's absolutely fine. We need to look at that, and we need to make sure that it's absolutely perfect. So you're going to go through each seed. So once you're happy with the intro, move on to the verse, and we'll just extend that a bit further, and then we'll do the same process for the verse. We'll just do these, and what you'll notice currently I'm doing volume. Okay, it might be that you need to do an EQ adjustment, and you can automate that as well if needed. Okay, you won't always, you know, an EQ setting tends to be the same, but if you need to use the bypass, you can obviously automate that. Just recently done a webinar on automation, so go and view that at musictechstudent.co.uk/webinars, and you'll get the automation one, and that will talk you through that a little bit better. So we've done all that. The next thing that you might find is that, especially for this track, you need a bit more impact. Now what I did earlier on is I just doubled this tambourine part up, and I used what's called double tracking, or automatic double tracking in that case, where basically I set the tambourine up and I set just a little bit of delay on it. Now for some reason I've removed that delay, never mind. Anyway, so yeah, doubling the tracks is a fantastic thing to do to get a bit more impact. So we're looking at listening to each of the sections as we go through, changing and automating as needed. Once we've done that, we've got the hard task of making sure that we leave enough headroom ready for the mastering stage. Now, let me bring up my mixing panel again, and I like to view it like this. So I've got all my channels in one go, plus I can see my output channel, and I can see what headroom I've got. Now, what you're going to find, because you've just started automation, it's going to be very, very difficult for you to change these dials, because if you change anything and you start playing again, it will ping back, okay? So I say, oh, I just need to change that. Start playing again, and it will hopefully ping back. Or not, because that one wasn't automated, silly me. So once you've done all your automation, that will happen. So what you're going to need to do is find a technique. So we're looking for getting some headroom for our master, because obviously when we go to mastering, you do need maybe 2 or 3 decibels of headroom. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom into my tracks here, ever so slightly. Now I'm going to press A up here, and what you see is actually I've got loads of headroom, but if I didn't, I'm going to use this trim dial here, and what this does, let me press stop, what this does is it brings all the automation down in one hit. Okay, so you can do it relative to each other. Okay, so just bring it down a little bit, and you'll notice all of my numbers are changing. Okay, and voila, we've got that adjustment, and that's bringing it all down, and we're giving ourselves enough headroom. So I think that's pretty much all I've got to say about the mixing stage. You do have to go through each and every section. We are trying to make it as close to the original as possible. So you will have to do further editing. You will have to do automation. You might have to double up some of the parts to give them a bit more impact. You might have to do some parallel processing like we did earlier with the drums. You might have to change the sound of the instrument to get a better instrument, or you might have to edit the sound of the instrument to get a better instrument, to come into the editing panel and do that. This is your part now to be a bit more creative and see if you have missed anything. So as you're going through each of these sections, listen to the track, solo the track and just see if there's any subtleties that you miss. And maybe there's a panning opportunity that you've missed. Maybe there's a volume opportunity. Maybe there's an EQ opportunity, like a filter sweep that you've missed. You need to hone into all these areas and try and get the most amount out of this aspect. One of the mark criteria is control, and if you go through it in this methodical way, you will get that control 100%. Compare, contrast, compare, contrast. Good luck with the mixing, and we've just got one more video to do before I'm completely finished, and that's the mastering. So I'll see you in the mastering section.